shadow frequency, where the veil between this world and the next grows thin, and the things that whisper in the dark are given voice. From the cryptic candlelit studios, deep in the Indiana forests, your host, Matt Wilson, and his spectral producer, Juniper Ravenwood, unearth the forbidden, the forgotten, and the fearsome. So, still your heart, dim the light, and listen closely. For once you tune into the shadow frequency, you may never tune out.
Well, I knew I shouldn't have ate that peanut butter sandwich before turning the mic on. Goodness gracious. All right, Matt, let's see what the file cabinet's hiding tonight. All right. Okay, first thing out is a TV guide with every single channel circled at 3:13 a.m.
That feels less like a viewing schedule and more like a warning.
Yeah, and I'm not loving that somebody took the time to circle all of them. Let's see what else we got. Oh, good. Now I've got a manila envelope full of black feathers and a dentist appointment card.
Those are two things that should never be in the same envelope.
Agreed. That has bad news energy all over it. Oh, they don't see where this stuff comes from. And here it is, tonight's case file.
All right, what you got, June?
Episode 305, The Solway Firth Spaceman.
A quiet family photo, a lonely stretch of shoreline, and one of the strangest figures ever captured on film. I'm Matt Wilson.
And I'm Juniper Ravenwood.
And this is episode 305, The Solway Firth Spaceman.
You are tuned to the shadow frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. Hosted by Matt Wilson. Produced by Juniper Ravenwood. With Chris Beach. The darkness continues.
Tonight's file feels damp around the edges, like it spent decades buried under marsh grass and salt wind. It comes from the Solway, where the land flattens out, the horizon stretches too far, and a family outing in broad daylight somehow turned into one of the strangest photographic mysteries of the 20th century. A father raises his camera, his daughter smiles, nothing unusual is seen. No figure crossing the marsh, no stranger approaching through the grass, nothing at all. Then the film comes back, and there, standing behind the child where nobody remembers anyone standing, is a pale human shape the world would spend decades trying to explain away. Explain into legend, or explain into something much worse.
Thanks, Juniper. That's that kind of case I love, because it starts with something so normal you almost want to trust it more.
Right.
No midnight seance, no thunderstorm, just a picture that came back wrong.
Wrong in exactly the way that gets under your skin. Because if that figure was really there, why did nobody see it? And if it wasn't, why does it still look like it stepped in from somewhere else?
Tonight we're heading into Burgh Marsh, into Cold War shadows, strange official attention, and one image that feels unsettled every time you look at it.
Then let's open the file and see what's standing out there in the sunlight.
Thanks, Juniper, for digging into the file cabinet and pulling out a case that feels like it still has marsh mud on it. Tonight, we head to the Solway, up on the border country where England stares across towards Scotland, where the ground goes flat, wet, and open, and the sky feels too big for comfort. Burgh Marsh, near Burgh by Sands, sits on the Solway Firth, a broad estuary of mudflats, sand, salt marsh, and open, undeveloped ground. It's the kind of place where a person can look small very quickly, and where anything standing out there, even for a second, would feel wrong. Late spring of 1964, a quiet family outing. Carlisle fireman Jim Templeton had brought his daughter out to the marsh and took a photograph that should have been ordinary. But when the film came back, one frame seemed to show a tall, pale figure standing behind the child, shaped like a human being, but strange enough to earn a name that never let go, the Solway Spaceman. Templeton said there had been no one there. He sent the image to Kodak and to Carlisle CID. And the early conclusion, as the story was told, was not that the negative had been faked, but that nobody could explain what it had captured. That is what gives this case its bite. We are not starting with a light in the sky or a rumor told 3 towns over. We're starting with a family photo in daylight, open ground, no darkness to hide in, no seance table. Just a child on the marsh, and somehow a figure that looks as if it stepped into the frame from somewhere else entirely. The most unsettling mysteries are often the ones that happen with the sun still up, because daylight is supposed to make the world behave. This image never did. Once the picture hit the local paper, it did not stay local for long. David Clark's research notes that it appeared on page 1 of the Cumberland News and then spread across the world, while Templeton and his family were flooded with attention, letters, and theories. People saw an angel, an alien, a spirit form, or a visitor in some kind of protective suit. And once enough strangers start telling you your ordinary photograph has captured the impossible, the photograph stops belonging to your family and starts belonging to folklore. Now add the setting around the setting. The mystery grew in part because the camera was pointed toward a landscape already haunted by the Cold War imagination. Clark notes that the shot looked out across the Solway estuary toward Chapel Cross Nuclear Power Station, while Blue Streak rocket activity was tied to RAF Spade Atom near Carlisle. Official records backed the geography up. Chapel Cross sat close to the Solway Firth, and historic England identifies RAF Spade Atom as a Blue Streak underground launcher facility from the late 1950s. So even before the wilder claims begin, the ground under this story is already charged with rockets, reactors, secrecy, and the nervous atmosphere of the era. Templeton later said he was approached by 2 mysterious men connected to the government, men who arrived in a black Jaguar, referred to each other by numbers, and wanted him to take them back to the exact place where that picture had been taken. That detail sounds like something out of a pulp paperback, and maybe that is part of why it stuck. One impossible figure in a field is eerie. 2 numbered strangers showing up afterward makes it feel like somebody else understood the picture better than the man who took it. Then comes the leap across continents. Templeton claimed the image somehow intersected with Blue Streak events at Woomera in Australia, where figures on a launch range were later said to resemble the one in this photograph. Whatever the truth of that link, it gave the case its conspiracy spine. Suddenly, the Solway image was no longer just a British oddity pinned to a newspaper page. It became the sort of story people tell because it seems to brush up against military projects and explanations the public never quite gets to hear. And that is why the case endures. An ordinary father, an ordinary child, a bright day on open ground, a figure no one remembers seeing, a negative said not to be tampered with, a newspaper explosion, whispers of rockets, nuclear sites, and men who did not properly identify themselves. Even if you came into this story skeptical, the shape of it is almost unfairly good. It feels like one of those moments where the world slips once and the camera catches the seam. The question is not just what was standing behind that child. The question is whether the photograph saw something the human eye missed entirely. And that's where this case gets its claws in you, because it doesn't begin in darkness, it begins in sunlight.
It feels personal, which is somehow worse.
After the break, we'll step deeper into the fallout around the photograph, the official whispers, the Australian rocket connection, and the one explanation that still doesn't quite make the chill go away. Juniper, over to you.
That one really lingers, doesn't it? Kind of like this peanut butter sandwich I ate earlier. A child on the bright marsh, a picture that should have been harmless. And then a figure, that seems to arrive only after the moment is over. I'm guessing some of you are already thinking aliens, some of you thinking hoax, and some of you just staring at that image in your head wondering why it feels so unnaturally wrong. Chris has something lined up for you, and when we come back, Matt's going to dig into the part of the story where this strange little family photograph starts brushing up against Cold War machinery, mystery men, and the question of whether a camera can turn a real person into a legend. Now let's pass it over to Chris.
Coming at you from the shadows, Juniper. Quick reminder, if you like what you hear, make sure you follow, like, and subscribe wherever you listen. That support means everything to us. You can find The Shadow Frequency on YouTube, Facebook, TikTok, Rumble, and all podcast platforms. Our digital haunt is shadowfrequencypodcast.com. Full episode archive, shadow blog, merch store, voicemail messages, and ways to support the show. Now let's get back into it. Over to you, Juniper.
All right. Time to fire up the Spectral Cosmic Message Materializer. Flipping the switches now. Let's see what the old haunted contraption coughs up tonight. Ah, there it is, a curious little note drifting through the static like it got lost between dimensions.
Retrieved from the void.
Let's unfold it carefully and see what our listeners sent. This one says, "This is Beth from Wisconsin. I usually listen while I'm working nights in an office by myself, and your show really helps the time go by. I especially enjoy the UFO episodes and just wanted to send a note to say how much I've been enjoying the Shadow Frequency. Keep up the great work. Beth from Wisconsin." Beth, first off, thank you for listening, and second, that is exactly the kind of setting I imagine for this show. Quiet office at night, just you, the work, and something eerie playing in the background that maybe makes the hallway feel a little longer than it should. And I'm glad the UFO episodes are hitting the spot because tonight's case absolutely belongs in that weird corner of the file cabinet. And as always, if you want to send us a note, your strange story, or just let us know how you found the show, email us at shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. Matt, back to you for the second half.
You are tuned to the Shadow Frequency, where every whisper tells a story from beyond the veil. The darkness continues.
Thanks, Juniper, and thanks to Beth in Wisconsin for writing in. Tonight's case lives in that borderland between a weird old photo and something much bigger. One reason the Solway image refuses to die is that it was never just sold as a curiosity. David Clark notes that after the picture ran, Templeton and his daughter were pushed into a level of publicity they never asked for. The image was said to be genuine. The world wanted answers, and the family wound up dealing with a storm of attention. That matters because stories last longer when real people pay a real price for them. It keeps the whole thing from feeling like a campfire yarn somebody made up for fun. And once a mystery enters the bloodstream of the public, it starts growing new organs. The Solway case picked up the Men in Black beat, the military beat, the rocket beat. Templeton's story about the two numbered men in the Black Jaguar is one of the most memorable details in British UFO folklore. It has that unmistakable chill of official curiosity without official clarity. They wanted the location, they wanted the context. But if Templeton's account is accurate, what they did not give him was a satisfying explanation of who they were or why they cared. And then there is Woomera. This is where the case starts reaching beyond its strongest evidence and into mythic architecture. There really were Blue Streak launch attempts in that period. Hansard records that an initial attempt was frustrated by weather, and another was postponed after an electronic defect before the weather deteriorated again. So the rocket program is real, the delays are real, and the Cold War setting is real. What becomes much harder to lock down is the dramatic claim that men on the range look like the figure in Templeton's photograph, and that this somehow tied Australia back to the Solway Marsh. That is the point where I'll let one note of skepticism into the room because it belongs here and nowhere earlier. The strongest natural explanation is that the figure was probably Templeton's wife, Anna. Clark's summary of the later analysis says the camera may have shown only about 70% of what the lens actually captured, meaning someone could have stepped into the edge of the frame without being obvious through the viewfinder. Another photograph from the outing showed Mrs. Templeton in a blue dress, and that dress could wash out toward white in bright exposure. In other words, the spaceman may have been a real person seen from exactly the wrong angle under exactly the wrong photographic conditions. But here's why that explanation does not kill the atmosphere for me. Even if the figure was Anna Templeton, it still means one family photograph transformed an ordinary human being into an international phantom. That is its own kind of haunting. The image strips away the familiar cues that would let your brain say, "Oh, that is just your wife in the background." Instead, the brain sees a pale head, a strange stance, a broad, bright body, and suddenly it feels less like a person than an intrusion. We like to imagine that photographs settle arguments. We trust them because they freeze a moment. But the Solway image shows the opposite. A photograph can become the start of an argument that lasts for decades. It can carry just enough reality to feel undeniable and just enough distortion to remain unresolved. That is a dangerous combination. It invites belief, but it also keeps slipping away from proof. So whether you lean into the paranormal or practical, the final picture stays eerie. If it was something unknown, then one bright afternoon on the marsh produced one of the most famous uninvited figures in photographic history. If it was Mrs. Templeton, then a normal family moment became so visually wrong that it fooled generations of viewers, pulled in police, sparked government rumors, and attached itself to rockets and Cold War anxiety. Either way, the image left just enough room in the frame for dread to keep breathing. That is why people still bring it up, not because the evidence is overwhelming, but because the image is emotionally stubborn. You look at it and your eyes do not want to accept the ordinary answer, even when your brain knows there probably is one. The marsh is too open, the day is too bright, the figure is too human-shaped and too alien-looking at the same time. Maybe that is the real secret of the Solway Firth Spaceman. Not that it proved a visitor from somewhere beyond us, but that it exposed how thin the line can be between documentation and legend. One click of a camera, one overbright shape, one family outing, and for more than half a century that single frame has kept asking the same wicked question. When a photograph feels wrong in your bones, how much proof does the ordinary world need before you believe it anyway? That's the kind of case I never really close all the way.
Because even the ordinary explanation still feels haunted.
Exactly. Sometimes solving the picture doesn't solve the feeling.
And sometimes that feeling is the part that follows you out of the room.
That's tonight's file. Juniper, let's put it back in the cabinet before it develops anything else.
Tonight, we open the file on one of the most famous strange photographs ever taken, a bright day on Burgh Marsh, a family snapshot, and a human-shaped figure that turned a simple moment into decades of debate, folklore, and unease. Thanks for spending part of your night with us here on the Shadow Frequency. If you want to get in touch, send us an email to shadowpodcast@protonmail.com. You can also find our website, shadowfrequencypodcast.com. You'll find episodes, blog posts, and merchandise. We've got 4 new t-shirts, so check those out. And be sure to follow along on all the usual haunts. We'll be back soon with another strange case pulled from somewhere deep in the shadows. Matt, you want to say goodnight?
Good night, everybody, and maybe take a second look at the old photos.
Sleep tight and keep one ear on the static. We'll see you next time.
This episode was conjured with a solemn vow to explore the unexplained while remaining bound to the truths that have been unearthed. All interpretations are speculative and offered only for your enlightenment and